Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to this presentation of the MPAI Metaverse model. This is a major standard that the MPAI has developed and published recently. But before doing that, let me say 2 words about who is MPAI, Moving Picture Audio Data Coding by Artificial Intelligence, international affiliated nonprofit standard developing organization developing AI-based data coding standards with clear intellectual property right licensing framework. So we have a rigorous process to develop standard that includes 8 steps, starting from the development, functional requirement, commercial requirement, call for technology, standard development, publication, pre-publication, before the final publication of a standard. So it is quite a rigorous standard because the standards are important things. So what's the feature of MPAI standards? We make explicit the computing workflow of AI application. We break up monolithic AI application into a set of interacting components that have known data semantics as far as possible, so that developers can offer improved performance standard components, and they can compete in an open marketplace. And humans can select application whose internal application they can understand to a large extent. So this is the summary, component-based subdivision in smaller component AI modules, aggregating in one or more workflows AIW and executed in a standard environment as specified by MPAI AIF. So this is the diagram representing it. We have the green boxes represent the AI modules. So they are variously interconnected in an AI workflow that is executed in the under supervision or control in the AI framework. Another important point is that we try and provide the means for the ecosystem to be sustainable. So every standard, and the MPAI standard are no exception, create an ecosystem composed of developers, integrators, consumers. We have identified the MPAI store as the entity that guarantees that the components are interoperable, trusted, and available. This is specified by the governance of the MPAI ecosystem. So the MPAI ecosystem is this. We have MPAI, we have developers developing implementation, we have performance assessors, we have the MPAI store, we have the end users downloading implementation and possibly reporting their experience score. So one point about making standard accessible and timely available. The third point in the first slide. Before initiating a standard, the active principal member develop and adopt the framework license, which is not a license really because it does not contain values, dollars, percentage, dates, and so on, but it contains that the statement that the eventual license will issue at the price comparable with similar standard technologies and not after products are on the market. During the development, any MPAI member making a contribution declares it will make its license available according to the framework license, and after the development, members holding IP in the standard select the preferred patent pool administrator. So this is the organization, General Assembly, which of course is the main body because the members attend this. We have several committees developing different groups because we have so far developed 13 standards. And today we are talking about the red one, which is the MPAI Metaverse model. We have also standards under development, which are marked in italic. So let's start the presentation. What is a metaverse? Of course, there are a lot of definitions, but this is not an agreed definition. But I mean, at a very high level, it is a computing platform enabled a virtual space that is not static, it evolves because it is influenced by the real world and by virtual spaces in the metaverse or in other virtual spaces. and influencing the real world and other virtual space, and of course, as I say, influence and influencing. Is the metaverse useful? There's quotation marks, of course, because I mean, certainly the notion of metaverse can be applied to many areas of human endeavor. Um, to connect to remote physical places, to reproduce and monitor complex phenomena in a simplified and controlled environment. They call it industrial metaverse, to create fictitious but attractive visual and virtual environment, to merge virtual and a real environment. So it's useful for many things, but this is a good point, but it's also a difficult point because it's difficult to develop something that satisfies all the needs. Therefore, the next question is the metaverse a sure bet? Well, it's really early to say, but for sure there are successful implementation for some areas. There are latent needs in many other areas. But, it can be said that technology is not mature enough to satisfy needs that are important. They definitely not mature enough. So promote the development of metaverse. There are two approaches, mainly. Industrial players design and implement metaverses that suit their own needs, or a standard body that specifies the metaverse for many users. One or many, not necessarily just one, but we have done one. What are the pros and cons of the two approach? The first one is costly, risky, but if it succeeds, there are big gains. On the other hand, if we have many competitive solutions, this creates confusion and delay acceptance. The approach number two is doable, the standardization approach. But what are the most important things to develop and for which applications? Because a metaverse standard is really a bigger case of a standard with many stakeholders. There are people addressing number one. We think that the approach number two is the good one, and this is what we have done. So before doing anything, this is what we did. We have analyzed applications that are potentially served by the metaverse, technologies that are required to implement the metaverse, and which are the business players whose role is needed in the metaverse. So these three things were addressed in the first technical report that we published now almost 2 years ago. And there's an important 2 points to be taken into consideration, that the metaverse standard is mainly a communication standard as a baseline, but it should support many verticals. So this is the challenge. So what should then the metaverse do if we wanted to make a specification? So we can say that a metaverse is handling things that are kind of a replica of the real world. Therefore, the things that the metaverse can talk about are exactly the things that humans are talking about every day. Probably a much smaller number of things, but it is about these things. Therefore, a metaverse should understand the request from other metaverses talking about what we humans talk, and make understandable requests to other metaverses. Well, this is another definition of standard, if you want. So, the conclusion is that metaverses should communicate as humans do. They should use the sentences to, of course, they cannot be the complete complex sentences that you have, maybe not in English, but in Italian. You have it in German, even more complex sentences. But some clear short sentences that describe a request or describe having executed a request. So there should be sentences that contain verb, noun, and complement, and And there should be a shared syntax semantics for what is needed. In addition, we should communicate using the standard language. I will say more about this element in this slide. So first, we should select the verbs and specify the functional requirements. So, for instance, we can say capture an object or a scene somewhere in the universe and place it somewhere in the metaverse. So a replica of it, of course. Animate a model with a stream and place it somewhere in the metaverse using data that are coming from the universe. Or render an object located somewhere in the metaverse to somewhere in the universe. So these are just examples, but this is things that we already do. Of course, we are not expressing exactly these things. Our language is at higher level, but bottom line, this is what we say. So we select the verbs, we select the nouns representing entities in the metaverse universe, and specify syntax and semantics. Some nouns require specification of technologies to be understood. So this is very much the crucial point that I will discuss in a minute. Select a minimal set of complements. You remember verb, nouns, and complements. And then when everything has been done, we should verify that the nouns, the verbs, nouns, and complements that we have defined completely, hopefully, are sufficiently rich for the intended use in the metaverse. So let's start, let's continue with nouns, because this is where the crucial thing is. So for instance, we wanted to execute, we are asking a metaverse to execute the request to capture an object somewhere in the universe and place it somewhere in the metaverse. So if we wanted to be able to do that, we need to know the format of the captured object that is used by the sensor. And this has impacts on the type of sensor that is used by the metaverse. We should also know the representation of the captured object in the metaverse, because this has an impact on the ability of a client to access and perceive the object in the metaverse. So a standard should select the technology to achieve this, of course, but the question, very serious question that we have, and of course we have not been the only ones asking this question, is this the right time to make such choices? And our answer has been, and again, we are not alone with the difference that we propose a way out. It is more prudent to only signal the choices that are made by the entity, the metaverse, the client, that generates the data. So we have to signal what is the nature of this data. And so this is a standard that we have already developed in MPAI. We have already at version 1.1, and the next week we should be able to publish an initial version of 1.2. So we have defined qualifiers that carry information about technology. Carry also more, but here we are particularly focused on technology. So what is the information of the technology? It can be the color space of visual data, or it can be the sampling frequency of audio data, the format used to represent an avatar, the format of the file or the stream of a speech segment. These are examples of data types that are heavily based on technology. And unless you specify what technology you are using, you're not going to be to interoperate with other entities. So the specification I was talking about is called data types, formats, and attributes. It is at version 1.1, which, by the way, specifies the technologies, now the signaling of technologies that are needed by the metaverse. So what is specified is the subtype, for instance, the color space, the format, and an attribute. For instance, an example of attribute is an idea of an object that is present in a certain space. Another consideration is on the fact that, as we have said at the beginning, there are many applications, and different application may need to use different sets of technology, not entirely, but partially different sets of technologies. And sometimes supporting a technology may be very costly. And therefore, the question is, why should a metaverse using, for instance, avatar technology if avatars are not used in that metaverse? So this is not a new problem in standardization. Well, almost 30 years ago, the first standard that made the reference to profile was published, was approved by MPAI. That was the MPAI-2 standard. And profiles are a list of technologies that need to be used to implement a subset of the standard. So that is the notion of profile, and we have also applied that notion. Therefore, the summary. This is what we have done. We have specified semantics on verbs, nouns, and complements used by the metaverse. Common language to convey metaverse messages between metaverses. Signaling mechanism to convey non-related technology choices, what I have described above, the qualifiers thing. Profiles that enable interoperable solution in specific domains. Still in the framework of a more general standard, profile is a subset of the standard. And then finally, verify that the verbs, nouns, and complements that we have specified are able to support practical solutions. We have a number of these. So let's now go into the real business of the specification. So we have this is the MPAI definition of what the metaverse is. It is able to sense data from universe locations. It processes sense data and produces items. Produces a subset of the metaverse called M environment that are populated by digitized item or virtual items with or without autonomy. So item is what I called before a noun. So an item refers to a noun. It can be an avatar. It can be an audio stream, anything. And this item can have autonomy. Then process item from inside the metaverse or even from other metaverses have an influence on universe environments and metaverse environments using these items that are expressed by nouns in the metaverse in ways that are consistent with the goals of the metaverse, within the capabilities of the metaverse, according to the rules of the metaverse, and respecting applicable laws and regulation. Finally, it has to operate according to and provide the functionality of the technical specification that I am talking about today. So let's go into a short analysis of what is the operation model of an M instance, the MPAI word for metaverse. It is subdivided in M environment, we have already said. Of course, it allows a human to register, but it may request a subset of their personal profiles. It gives a right, a set of rights to the registering human to deploy one or more users, devices, and persona. I will explain in a second what is meant by these things. And it behaves as if it is implemented by a set of processes. And I think it's important to say that we are not imposing a model. We are describing how the system should behave. And in order to describe it properly, we use the notion of process. A process has process capabilities that enables to perform process actions, another term that I will explain in a second, on items. But, it can do that if it has the rights to do that. So rights is another basic notion. So it has the capability. It may not have certain capability. Therefore, it can request the process to perform actions by sending request action and responding with the response action. This is the first protocol that we have specified, the inter-process protocol. And then performing the request, if it is has been requested to do something, but of course the requested process must have the rights to perform the process action that it has been required to perform on the item. So this is a short introduction to the inter-process protocol. I won't go into the detail of that, but we want to say that an M instance enables a process to communicate it to another M instance. So this is another important, very basic protocol whereby we can communicate between different M instances. And can also obtain conversion on an item data format via a conversion service, because I said before that with Signal, or the technology that we use. But if the receiving entity does not have that technology, either it does nothing or it relies on a conversion service. So this is a simple description of the inter-M instance protocol. So you see that we have two metaverses with each with processes. And so this is what happens. Let's imagine that process A1 wants to communicate with process B1. It issues a request action because that is part of the general protocol between processes. But here we have an obstacle because the two processes are in different metaverses. This request goes to a resolution service that translates that into another request action that goes to the resolution service B that may make another conversion of the request, and the request goes to process B1. Is that the end of the story? Unfortunately not, because it may happen that a particular item uses the technology that process B1 is unable to handle. Therefore, it goes to a conversion service and obtains, in response, another version of the item that it is able to understand. Then it does what it has to do, and it will respond eventually with a response action that goes to the resolution service. This new action goes to the resolution service that goes to originating process A1, which again may be faced with the same problem that in this item there is a technology that it's unable to handle, so it goes to a conversion service that provides the response. So this is a very simple description of something that is really the basis for interoperability between metaverses. So you see that now we are not imposing the notion of a process, but if you want to have an easy life dealing with a complex process problem, it is good to implement process, because then you can apply this inter-M instance protocol without problems. So Finally, let's go to the four types of process we consider. So a process is a process, but sometimes it's helpful to distinguish the processes. For instance, you can have a device. A device for us is a process because we are not considering items, the atoms. We are considering the software, the process that runs on the device. User is a key element I have already mentioned before because it represents a human register with the M instance and is under the control of that humans. Then we have general services that provide the specific functionalities. For instance, an authoring service. Okay, it's a process, but it's good to call it service. And we have apps that may run on a device, and again, they are another type of process. The summary is this, in the sense that we have the human here in the universe. We have a device. A device may have an app, or we can have the user. The user can run on the device itself, or it can run on the Metaverse platform. And the user, this is an absolutely important point. A user is not an avatar. A user is a process, and it is represented as such. And this process may very well never be seen because it is never rendered. But if it does, then it does that using a persona that has been registered with the metaverse at the beginning. And the process can have more than one persona, which is the instantiation of the user. And of course, the user can talk to other processes that can be devices, users, and services. So this is the summary. Therefore, we have the user and represented for the purpose of being rendered as a persona. It talks with other things. In particular, it talks to a resolution service that talks to another resolution and talks to another service, another user, which again is represented, represents this human here and is represented by this persona. So let's go now more into the specific of the technologies that is used here. So we have already said that the processes are four: apps, devices, services, and users. I mean, there is a specification, but the specification is not a technology specification; it's a functional requirement specification. Then we have identified actions. So a process may be able to do certain action, may be able to understand an audio object, but may not be able to handle a visual object. That depends on how the metaverse has been created, what kind of users you want to have in the metaverse. So many things that are not the target of a specification. And so we have identified 5 classes of actions. General action, for instance, registering, authenticating, identifying. Identifying is crucial because if we import the data from the universe, we must convert this data in a form that is understandable by the metaverse, and this process is called identified. So we have a lot of services. For instance, author, discover. Discovery is like we request to discover information on the web today. And so we have also transact, which is a basic function in the metaverse. We have converse, we have resolve, the resolution service I was talking before. Then we have 3 very specific classes for action that happens in the metaverse, or actions that are originated in the metaverse but have an influence on the universe, and actions that are performed in the universe and have an impact on the metaverse. So let me say, we have embed. This is really the crucial thing because it corresponds. I wanted to place my avatar there in the metaverse. Okay, all right, good. But before that, I needed to animate it. And animated, animated. This is an animation that is just performed by a process, by an autonomous process. Because if I want to embed myself in the metaverse, I have to use an embedding from the universe to the metaverse. And when I wanted to display the result of what happens in the metaverse, I have to use MU embed. So I embed something from the metaverse to the universe. And we have other similar things that, in the interest of time, I'll skip. Now let's go to the world, because this is really a big world of items. We have defined, and these are specified. They are all specified with JSON syntax and semantics. For instance, we have contract. That's pretty basic. We have rules. This is even more basic because this sets the things that are allowed in the metaverse, and a particular account may allow users or processes to perform a subset of what is allowed by the rules. Uh, Something that relates to human and user and account. Activity data is a recording, is a log of what a user or a process has done, or personal profile, personal data. Process interaction, we have the capabilities of a process. Process action is the basic thing that they've described before, and they will say something more because this is really crucial. Then we have the request action, the response actions. Authentication, discovery, for finance, amount, asset, currency, provenance. So an asset has a story, it has a history, and this history is written in the provenance. Then we have transaction, we have wallet. Then we go to the one that for humans is very important, which is the perception part. So we have the means to describe an audio scene that we call basic. Basic because it only contains objects, but we have the audio scene descriptors that can contain objects and scenes, and so recursively. So we have that for audio, we have for audio visual, we have for visual, we have then internal state. This is something that we think that is a very, very useful concept in the metaverse, in the sense that it is important to be able to describe the internal state of a person or an avatar. We call that, and because of that, we call it entity. And we have some cross emotion, but we have also identified cognitive state and social attitude, and the combination of all three is called the personal status. Then we have space-time information, we have orientation, we have the point of view, which is position plus orientation. Spatial attitude is position and orientation, and they are time derivative up to the second order. And we have universe and metaverse map, which is a very, very useful data type to create via AR applications. So process action, as I said, is the critical point because this is how we describe the rights of a process. So, and it describes the actions that the process has performed. This is for for recording process purposes, or can perform because it has the right. Well, in the sense that it may perform in the future, or it may ask another process to perform. It specifies the time when this is done, which are the items, or the classes of items, of course, not item by item. In addition to item, we also specify the case when data coming from the universe are not convertible into an item. The location in the metaverse, the location in the universe. And then we need some complements. So we wanted to use some information that is owned by a user. And we say that this is at, or an object that is at a certain M location or another, or at a certain U location, and so on and so on. So would be an interesting slide to work on, because it is process actions that works. So we have here some actions are not simple actions, but they are composite actions. So for instance, embed is the combination of the action of placing an object in the metaverse and not making it visible, because enable is what converts an embedded object into an object that is visible. So in the interest of time, I will skip that, but you will have the possibility to look at these slides, because they will be posted to our website. So finally, let me go to the last step of this standard, which is a rather thick and dense standard. So we have developed 9 use cases in different areas. One of them is the use case where you have a dance theater that is operating a dance school in the metaverse. So what does this guy do? Of course, this is not the guy himself, because it is the user, but nevertheless, it places one avatar, persona number 1, somewhere in the dance school, and that persona is a virtual secretary that is animated by an autonomous agent. Okay? Now student number 1 comes. So it shows up at the school, greet the secretary, because, the secretary appears as a regular secretary, and the virtual secretary reciprocates. Then the dance theater teacher places a persona in the dance, somewhere in the dance school. But this is not a normal persona. This is a haptic persona, because, if you want these 2 avatars to dance, both the teacher and the student have to have haptic reactions. So then the avatar dances, which is persona number 2, dances with the avatar of student number 1. Student number 2 now shows up at the school while the teacher is dancing with student number 1. The teacher places the persona, the currently used persona, closer to student number 2, but it cannot abandon student number 1, and therefore it places a haptic persona number 3 close to it, and therefore it animates this haptic persona with an autonomous agent that knows how to dance with the student, and therefore the teacher continues to the instruction with student number 2. So this is something that, of course, it would be great if I could use this table to describe what the process actually is. So here you see the teacher, the process, this is the action, this is the item on which it is applied, and this you see at, with, from. So these are the complement that I was talking about. So this shows that given the right technologies, it is possible to apply the MPAI MMM specification to implement a dancing school in the metaverse. With that, I thank you very much for your attention so far. I understand that it's been quite long, and we look forward to working with you on this exciting MPAI project. And you see here information about the project. Well, it's no longer a project because it is already a standard. We are working on new elements of that standard, and you know, if you join, you will be able to share the fun that we have while we build the future. Thank you very much for your attention.